Welcome back to Desire. Right as I was about to head back, a piercing wail akin to the shrieking of a banshee rang out from behind me. So much for enjoying a quiet afternoon. Okay, I was adjusting the volume because I was like, well, she's really quiet. Just because she's far away. It was a time like this that I questioned why I was even friends with this girl. In the first place, who would consider it a good idea to start yelling someone's name in the middle of a street like that?
お前ちょっと声でかすぎ。
隊員おめでとう。ねえ、どう？元気かな？もう痛いとこない？
He's a cutie.
何よその顔。どうかした？
I wanted nothing more than to tell her that yes, I was in a great deal of pain just now, as she had just walloped me something good on the shoulder. But I settled for just giving her a dirty look. This was Kasumi Ayase. Ayase? Ayase. I say this name right. My childhood friend of the same age. She was the head of the Kendo Club at her school. As you can probably tell by this incident, she was rambunctious enough to have competed at a national level several times. And here she was, giving me the same wide smile as usual. I suppose this sort of upbeat attitude was one of her strengths.
お前なんでここにいるわけ？
Gotta love people who have like boundless amounts of energy, right?
何よ、いちゃ悪いの？
悪いっていうか不自然だろ。
Her eyes look funny. Maybe it's just the artwork. It was the middle of the day. Why wasn't she at school? She's skipping again. I told her about that.
サボったのか？
See? She's skipping.
まあね。
Ah.
なんで？
なんででしょう。
To see me. Oh, how sweet of you. Oh my goodness. I don't know what to say. Oh, if I knew. I threw up my hands.
私ね、一刻も早くレンちゃんに会いたかったの。
She totally has the hots for us.
会いたかったの。
I missed you too. I don't even know who you are.
会いたかったの。
ああ、そうなの。
I was glad to see that her stupidity was in full form again today.
留年希望か、お前。
大丈夫よ。あんたよりは私、日数足りてるし。
I was in the hospital. I had a bit of an excuse. She said as she violently slapped me on the back, hurt like a bitch, let me tell you.
とまあ、それはそれとして。あんた何一人で勝手に帰ってんのよ。迎えに行くって私言ったの、覚えてないわけ？
いや、そりゃ覚えてたけど。
I just wanted to get out of here before you showed up. I wasn't exactly expecting her to skip school just to come pick me up, and it would have been a pain in the ass to wait around that long. I tried to explain my line of thinking, but Kasumi wasn't having any of that.
じゃああんた、後で電話とかする気だったの？
Oh, you're a good ventriloquist. I like that. Definitely not. I was not planning to call her.
っていうかお前の番号って何番だっけ？
Oh boy, she's gonna hate us.
これだから全くこの野郎はよ。何ですか？君は携帯使えないんすか？いつの時代の人ですか？着信履歴の見方すらわからんお人なのですか？
失礼だな。それくらいわかるぞ。
Just because I don't care doesn't mean I don't understand.
じゃ貸せこのクソ。
Kasumi snatched away my cell phone and began to tap away at lightning speed. Rude.
はい、電話帳のトップに入れといたからね。消したら怒るぞ。つうか閉めるぞ。
笑顔で言うなよ。ところでこれなんだ？愛のヴィーナス。
Venus of love, really? Come on.
あたし。
とりあえず狂気のベルセルクに変えとくけどな。
Nice.
変えんな。っていうかそれ、頭痛が痛いと同じレベルの重複表現。
それくらい強調したいんだよ。
Emphasis is very important.
そもそもヴィーナス名乗るなら少しは女の子らしい言葉を使ってくれ。
That's true. You're not acting very feminine. Not to say that's necessarily a bad thing, but, you know, when you think of Venus, you think of a very feminine, beautiful person. And she is, well, being very, yeah.
誰が怒らせてると思ってんのよ、このバチ当たり。 ならこう私の手とかがっしり握って、ありがとうかすみ、君は僕の天使だよとか、そういう感謝の一つや二つって、ほらこっち見る。
Not that kind of man.
あんたいきなり大怪我して入院して、私心配して毎日お見舞い行ったのに、当の本人は上の空で挙句勝手に退院してこんなところをプラプラしてるさ。何様ですか、マジですか、やる気あんのかつうかやんのかこら。
How dare I leave the hospital?
やる気も何も。
Kasumi seriously needed to cool before she popped a vein? She was the one acting unreasonable here, not me. Maybe she would calm down a bit if I had actually did the whole my angel thing, but I didn't feel like going through all that.
そもそもあんたは。
However, I did have just the thing to shut her up. Are we gonna kiss her? Oh man.
とりあえずお前が病室に持ち込んだ諸々は家の方に送っといたぞ。
はい。
Hi. How you doing?
捨てるわけにもいかないだろう。だから家に送ったんだよ。気が利くだろ。
ちょい待ち、それ全部？
そう、
All
全部。
of them. The comics, the books, and of course, the magazines full of naked ladies. Of course.
その待って家ってどっちの方や？
You're home.
実家。
Please don't break the piano. We only have one of those.
冗談だよね。
冗談は苦手だな。
マジで？
I like this guy already. He's a spitting image of myself.
マジだ。
I told you. It would be a sad day indeed for Mrs. ISA once she received that package and learned exactly what her daughter had been buying. A questionable talk will come up.
あんた最悪。買うの恥ずかしかったのに。
Why did you buy it?
じゃあ買うなよ。
Exactly. Don't buy it.
でもさ、役に立った？
I'm sorry. What? Yeah, the articles were very nice. I enjoyed them greatly. Now that she mentioned it, the other patients in the room with me had been big fans of those magazines. They didn't pester me while they were occupied with them, so I guess you could say I got use out of them after all.
そこそこ。
I mean, I didn't use them, but my friends did.
そう、本当に？あんたそんなやつだったの？
Will you shut up? You're the one who's asking leading questions like that. Did you get use out of them? Well, yeah. Oh my god, how could you? Pervert.
どんなやつだよ。
ねえちょっと具体的にどの号の何ページが役に立ったの？試しに言ってみなさいよ。
I'm sorry, what? Oh, wow. Okay. Should I? Oh my god. What do I pick? What do I pick? It's okay. If I screw up, I can go back. I was lying. Oh, I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to answer this stuff, though. You think she's into the cosplay or S&M? Not that stuff. That's horrible. S&M, right? Yeah. No. Cosplay. Cosplay's the ticket. That's the ticket. That was not the ticket. Light and Katsumi's eyes went out.
キモ。
What? What? Hang on. There's a button. There's a button here. I don't know what button it is. There's a button to go back to, the previous choice. I don't know what button that is. Hang on 1 second. Okay, F6 is the button. Boom. You can, use F6 to skip to your previous choice, F7 to skip to the next choice if you just want to do the routes without, like, the story, which is actually a pretty nice feature. So, okay, this game has a specific choice route that you're supposed to follow to get all the story, because otherwise you're going to lose it. You're not going to understand what's going on if you just skip around the routes. I really don't like games that do that, but, you know, whatever, right? This is Kasumi's route is recommended for the first route. You don't pick any of this stuff. Apparently all this stuff she's gonna be like, oh, well, I don't like it. You're a horrible person. I was lying. Because we were lying. Technically we were lying, right? We didn't use it. Okay, that was not the answer I expected. You just asked me. You just asked me. Are you petting my crotch? She said poking... Okay. Poking my cheeks with her thumb? Shiro had been wearing armor rings during our fight, so my cheeks were cut up to hell and back when I first entered the hospital. I didn't really care if it left scars or not myself, but Kasumi got so worked up over it while I was recovering that I kept my face covered with bandages just so she would shut up about it. Case in point. She totally wants us. I mean, come on. Come on, she's laying it on pretty thick here. Giving us porn mags. Skipping school to worry about our well-being. There were a few things I disliked more than being told that my face looked pretty. That's if it looks grotesque, which I also do not. Back when I was a kid, I used to get mistaken for a girl all the time. I'm just that beautiful. Unpleasant memories, to say the least. And even as a teenager, it still happened from time to time, despite the fact that I was hardly short or anything. Scouts trying to recruit female models had called out to me on the street on more than one occasion. Definitely kind of thing that does blow to your pride as a man. I decided to let Kasumi have a piece of my mind. I Going home. I just got out of the hospital. Jesus.
Huh?
Oh, come on. Come on. No. Oh my gosh. I wasn't sure I understood what was going on inside Kasumi's head at that moment. But that was probably for the best. Who's Rhea? Find out later. I'm going into this game completely blind, by the way. I'm only following this guide because it's very spoiler-free. It only shows the next choice. It doesn't show, like, you know, like, story-wise what happens, but...
Nani?
Why bring up Himura here? Ooh, what? Oh, I'm gonna give her a piece of my mind. The hell? What on earth was she thinking? Is she a scary person? Should I be scared of her? Probably. I wouldn't describe her as scary, so I shouldn't be scared of her. Okay, good to know. I mean, she was the type that was a little hard to get a handle on, sure, but still. Date. If you want a date so bad, I'll give you one. It's June 12th. It's just that I didn't even know where we would go. Like, just going to the amusement park with Kasumi didn't really feel like anything special. I mean, I don't know, right? Dates are supposed to be special, right? I was about to tell her that we should just forget about it, but Kasumi started like fishing around in her bag. She finally pulled something out. 2 tickets. Well, they provided us with tickets to the local museum. Not exactly what you'd expect a teenager to pick of all things. So does this mean that the whole date thing was already set in stone? Looks like it. This is why you came to get me. It would seem the answer was yes. I had no choice in the matter. The museum was located away from the main streets. While we were on our way there, I asked Kasumi something that had been on my mind. It wasn't a huge museum or anything, but it was a fancy sort of place that frequently held exhibitions for paintings, ceramics, and the like. Didn't seem very Kasumi to me.
似合わないって？
どうだか。ただ先輩ならハマるかもな。
Well, that's probably why she had the tickets.
なんかそれ、私が非生産的なやつみたいで嫌なんですけど。
I didn't say that.
お前何か生産できたか？
Besides headaches and suffering?
料理作れるよ。
You can cook. Interesting. Was that really so special? I mean, not that I was the one to talk. Cooking and me went together about as well as oil and water.
とりあえずお前の料理は置いといて、結局何がコンセプトの展示なんだよ。
見てわからない？
No. Thought we talked about this. Don't make fun of my non-reading ability. Kasumi flashed the tickets at me, a wicked gleam in her eye. Frankly, the text on the tickets was printed so large that it would have been impossible not to notice, but
一応確認だけな。
I was still holding out hope that I was just seeing things. Because if I wasn't, that meant we were straight on our way to a gala featuring an assortment of objects I was not interested in seeing. Unfortunately,
世界の刀剣博物
Blades of the
館。
World. Oh, that sounds cool. I want to go. My hopes were thoroughly crushed. This was no way to treat someone who just got out of the hospital. Yeah, free museum. A date with a pretty girl. Yeah. Horrible way to be treated. Eventually, we reached the museum. Though Kasumi had to basically fight me tooth and nail the rest of the way here, I'd spare you the details of her dragging me around the place after we got there. I'd prefer not to remember. And so.
ねえちょっと。
Oh.
いつまでそんな顔してるのよ。
Oh, those are cool looking swords. Oh, look at that one on the left. That looks neat. Kasumi muttered in exasperation while looking at a Nepalese knife known as Kyokuri. Couldn't help having a sour look on my face. The mere sight of these kinds of blades had me nauseous for as long as I could remember. Why did she take me here in the first place? She knew full well I wasn't good with sharp objects.
情けないな。別に噛みついてきたりしないのに。
なんでつわれても。
Long story. Her tone was genuinely curious. Unfortunately, this was not something I had a clear answer for.
お前毛虫嫌いなのに理由があるか？
毛虫かわいいじゃん。なんかけなげで。
じゃあゴキブリは？
見つけたら叩いて潰すね。
ならヘビとかは？
Snakes, you. Every girl hates snakes.
巻きつけると気持ちよくない？ひんやりしててさ。
I was wrong. Wonderful. I suppose I was wrong to expect a girlish response out of Kasumi in the first place.
なんか言った？
気にするな。
Well, whatever the case, these things just didn't sit well with me. Little Miss Kendo over here might have found the blades on display fascinating, but I was definitely not having a good time.
もう一通り回ったし、そろそろいいだろう。帰らないか？
つまんないよ。デートでしょ？
お前俺とデートしても楽しくないだろう。
それはあんたの態度次第ね。
You're right, we're a sourpuss. We should fix that. She was telling me this?
俺の態度は昔からこん
That's
な
true.
だ
We've
ろ。
always been kind of a jerk,
病
though.
み上がりなんだし、高いハードル持ってくるな。
ほんとしょうがないな。
Kasumi heaved a deep sigh. I was beginning to think that she actually understood, but...
じゃあ最後にもう一回りして帰ろうか。
No, of course she didn't. Why would she, right? And so we ended up taking one more lap around the museum. I did my best to avoid looking directly at any of the blades on display. I wasn't sure I could really explain exactly why I had this thing against blades. But it wasn't because I felt scared of them, no. Maybe they just weren't compatible with me. I didn't want to have anything to do with them, period. So like mixing Ranfuji and bladed weapons was a bad idea, like putting ketchup on a donut. Keeping my distance was the smart move if I wanted to maintain the peace and harmony of my life. In a way, you know, they almost reminded me of Shiro. Oh. Damn Shiro. I shook my head. Reminiscing about that guy was the opposite of a productive activity. I was on a date, after all? Worrying about Kasumi would be a better usage of my time. Not that I had much confidence in managing that either, but it would be the polite thing to do, at least. What?
Oh.
何？どうかした？
Am I hearing voices? I mean, I just got out of the hospital. I'm still a little lightheaded.
Oh, yeah.
Still drugged up, right? I could have sworn I heard something. Was it just my imagination? Nope. I heard that. So I really was hearing a voice coming from somewhere.
Ren?
Shh, quiet. I'm hearing voices. I strained my ears. The museum was quiet enough that it should have been easy to make out the voice I had heard, assuming it wasn't my imagination. Murderer? It was coming from this direction.
ちょっと待ってよ。どこ行くの？
I ignored Kasumi and ran off. I wasn't quite sure myself why I felt so compelled like this. There was no clear reason to concern myself over some voice in the distance. Either way, I found myself drawn to the spot of the voice was coming from. Perhaps it would have been more accurate to say I was guided there, even. I found myself in an obscure corner of the museum, the sort of place you'd never come across if you were just taking the normal route through. Normally, you wouldn't think there would even be an exhibit piece somewhere out in the way like this, and yet there it was.
Guillotine?
A guillotine. I was sure everyone had heard of a guillotine, the execution device used for beheadings. This exhibit wasn't an entire guillotine, though, just the blade used for the beheading itself. The blade before me distinguished itself from the rest of the exhibits by demonstrating a cold simplicity. There was nothing glamorous or decorative about it. This was a lump of steel, designed for the sole purpose of beheading with ruthless efficiency. You'd likely not find a more suitable tool for its task. Why was something like this even on display? It was a blade, yes, but it differed from anything else I'd seen on a fundamental level. It might have held historic value, but it wasn't a weapon or implement of some ritual. More than anything, though, I wanted to know why I found myself drawn to it.
何これ？私全然気づかなかったよ。
Kasumi had finally caught up with me. She took a glance at the guillotine from over my shoulder.
レン、よくこんなの見つけたね。何？
ボワード・ジュスティス、正義の柱。ギロチンの正式名だよ。あと、フランス語。
I actually didn't know they were called that. I always knew they were guillotines. I never knew of the French name. Interesting.
それから、マクシミリアン・ロベスピエール。知ってるだろ？ 18世紀の政治家だけど。
恐怖政治の？
そう、そいつに使ったものだって書いてる。
That's pretty cool. Robespierre was a key figure during the French Revolution, the man responsible for sending those who opposed to the reign of terror to the guillotine. Ironically, his end would come by the same device he had employed upon so many of his political opponents in the Bourgeois. This was supposed to be from back then?
なんかうさんくさいな。信憑性はなさそうだ。
でもそんな風に書かれてるとなんか嫌な感じだね。
同感だ。
Authenticity aside, the idea of putting something like this on display was simply in bad taste to begin with. How to put it? The whole thing felt too raw. The object on display here was a tool of execution, nothing more, nothing less, so perhaps it was only natural that...
これ、どれくらい殺したのかな?
One would just be too many, really. One would find themselves asking that question, precisely because the lack of ornament present in the other exhibits made its nature as an implement of death apparent.
あまり不謹慎なこと考えるなよ。これは興味津々に拝むようなものじゃない。
そうだけど、そもそも見つけたのはそっちじゃない。
誰だって嫌なものには敏感なんだよ。
Rivers of blood, screams echoing into the distance. All sorts of visions of death ran through my head looking at this thing. It wasn't often you found something that so clearly embodied the negative side. the original intent of a blade. Given that Robespierre's name was attached to it, it had to have been from the 18th century. If it had really been used during the French Revolution, it was safe to say that it had executed hundreds of people. Someone actually described the guillotine as a merciful form of execution. It was designed to sever heads at exactly the right angle and velocity to ensure that the criminals met with a swift, painless death. An instant death delivered at lightning speed. There was a reason some called it merciful. It's easy to get the wrong impression from the rivers of blood and mutilated corpses the guillotine produced. But for some facing execution, it was probably far preferable to be hanged. Well, assuming that the victim died before they had the chance to feel the pain of being decapitated, that is. I found myself thinking about exactly the sort of thing I just told Kasumi not to.
行こう。正直気分が悪くなってきた。
ああ、そうだね。ごめん、顔色悪いけど大丈夫？
平気だよ。別に体調が悪いわけじゃ。
Before I could get the word ill out. I heard the voice from earlier again, more clearly than ever. Who's there? Why did I react the way I did? If only I hadn't paid attention. If only I had ignored it. If only I hadn't looked at it. If only I hadn't spun around to face that dreaded blade. What? I would have never had to hear the cursed words borne forth from the ethereal figure standing in front of the guillotine. How could she have known that? What did she mean we were the same? The girl standing before me had the skin of the purest white, yet that beauty was irrevocably tarnished by a violent streak of crimson across her neck. I almost wanted to believe it was some sort of necklace, but no. The jagged pattern was unmistakably the scar that a decapitation would create. Looking back on things later, I would be able to say that this is where it had all begun. Does my present live up to your expectations, Zarathustra? And thus we met, brought together by him. Oh man, I missed it. It was dark out by the time I got home. I'd almost passed out at the museum earlier. I managed to make it back okay, but I still wasn't feeling too hot. At least it was consolation that Kasumi wasn't the type of person to get upset about having to deal with stuff like this. However, on the other hand, that also meant that she was the type to fret endlessly. My current goal was to figure out some way to make her leave me alone. If I did not, she was liable to spend the entire night here watching over me or something. I don't know. We're fine. Does she live like next door or something? I knew that she was just trying to help. I wasn't trying to be a jerk. But I still couldn't really think straight after what happened earlier. I probably came across as harsher than I had intended. She did have a point, to be fair. I wasn't the type of person people looked to for help.
だから
私そんなにやわじゃないよ。
俺もそんなにやわじゃないよ。だいたい俺を気遣ってるなら不毛なやりとりに付き合わせるなよ。ただでさえ明日から学校行くのが億劫なのに。
Damn school.
そうだった。ダメだよレン、サボっちゃ。
Huh, that's funny.
今日サボったやつに言われてもな。
私はいいの。ちゃんと毎日通ってたから1日くらい平気だよ。でもレンは入院して多分日数足りてないんだからね。留年しちゃうよ、怠けてると。
I was in the hospital. I wasn't exactly slacking off.
一緒に卒業したいもんね。ね。
そうだな。
Right.
よし、だったら早く寝る。
だからさっきからそう言ってるだろ。それをお前がごちゃごちゃと。
Oh, what's that poster in the background? Does anyone recognize that? Does that mean anything? Is that anything important?
うるさいな。
It's probably another game.
口答えするんじゃないの。
Kasumi threw some sheets on top of me. Surely there was a less direct methods of getting someone into bed.
じゃあおやすみ。明日起こしに来るからね。
それはいいけど、おいかすみ。ちゃんと玄関から出ていけよ。
Was she going through the windows?
おい。
Did she think she could get away with anything just by laughing it off?
それはちょっとめんどいなとか。
普通はその面倒なことが常識なんだよ、だいたい。
I gestured to the wall next to me inside.
いい加減大家に怒られるぞ。いくら隣同士だからって。
She would be in deep shit if the landlord found out that she had knocked out a goddamn hole in the wall and turned it into some sort of corridor, like this was the sort of thing people got kicked out for. Seriously? She did that? What? Kasumi and I had moved into this apartment together when we enrolled in our current school. It took her less than a week to come up with the idea to construct this little side entrance.
でも同じアパートの隣に住んで助け合うってのが一人暮らしの条件だったし、いいじゃない。この方が密にフォローできるんだから。
That is some weird condition.
けどな、親もまさかここまでやってるとは思ってないだろ、絶対に。
そうかな。
そうだよ。
頭固いな。だいたい事の発端はシロなんだし、私に言われても困っちゃうよ。
Believe it or not, she wasn't lying. Kasumi, Shiru, and myself had all lived together in this apartment complex. All 3 rooms next to each other in a row. How convenient. It happened late one night. Out of nowhere. Shiru broke down the wall separating our rooms and barreled in there with a hammer still in hand, saying he suddenly got the urge to play me in a fighting game. How stupid could he get?
何をとち狂ったか、お前も真似したんだよな、ご丁寧に。
私はハンマーなんて野蛮なことはしてないけどね。
She was barbaric enough to go down to the hardware store the next day and buy a power saw, some tarps, and a mask at least. Anyway, as I had the bad fortune to live in between these 2 idiots, I ended up with holes on both sides of my room. Privacy? What's that? Kasumi and Shiro would often just cut through here to visit each other, and my room became a sort of natural gathering place in general.
せめてシローの穴だけでも塞がせろよ。
ダメよ。戻ってきたらどうするの？
There was no what if. Shiro was never coming back, whether Kasumi knew it or not.
またみんな元通りになるんだから。私とレンとシロとでね。レン？
だな。
じゃあおやすみ。
Night. Kasumi smiled sweetly and returned to her room through the hole in the wall. I could tell by the complete lack of dust in my room that she had bothered to clean it while I was stuck in the hospital. Probably Shiru's too. I would never admit it out loud, but I did appreciate the consideration. At the same time, though, I couldn't help but wonder if I really deserved having her look after me like this. Kasumi knew nothing By all rights, right now we should have been... Oh, this line I thought would get me nowhere. I just said right then and there to stop mulling over the past. What was done was done. It wasn't healthy to keep obsessing like this. Who was that girl? There was no way the girl I saw at the museum could have actually been real. She was just a hallucination. Meaningless clutter that was born from my unstable mental state. Yeah. That's it. That was the only explanation. Nothing else works. I laid down in bed. A good night's sleep would be sure to wash away the memory of today. I wouldn't remember a thing. I woke up in the next morning. I was sure of it. I stared up at my own ceiling for the first time in 2 months. Amid familiar surroundings, I drifted off into sleep gripped by a slight unease, rather than a sense of comfort. Now then, let the curtains rise on tonight's grand guignol. 'Tis a pleasure to make your acquaintance, my dear Zarathustra. I am but a humble jester come to present you with an opera. Consider me not more than a swindler, a charlatan. My name? I suppose Cagliostro shall suffice. Cagliostro. Do allow me to regale you tonight with the tale of a girl I met while men still called me by that name. The tale of the fair princess of the guillotine. The tale of her origins, as well as how the two of us came to meet. I beg of you to forgive my brevity. It all came about as a result of simple bad luck, nothing more, nothing less. Humans are bound by their birth. The average man cannot hope to compete with an absolute brought about by sheer chance at birth, regardless of how his foibles or virtues. My story deals with just such circumstances. Unfortunately, there are many who fail to grasp the subtleties of these matters. Allow me to apologize for beginning by airing some tiresome grievances of mine. The less reasonable among us have a tendency to seek an explanation for anyone who they perceive as breaking the mold, be they a mighty hero, a blithering madman, or a miserable victim. Did they reach their status through tireless effort? Perhaps because they possessed a rare resolve. Or could it be because of some traumatic event in their past? Preposterous assumption, the lot of them. It's now nothing more than self-projection on the part of the common man. An expression of the fanciful idea that they too could have turned out that way. That they too are capable of reaching the same level should they be granted the same opportunities. Such sentiments are little more than masturbation, pitiful attempts to drag the supernatural down to their level and reduce it to something they are capable of understanding. Miserable knaves, the lot of them. They are incapable of cherishing their fellow men without forcing themselves to believe that all others operate on the same logic as them. Such fools would be better off conversing with a mirror. You will no doubt find tonight's story unpleasant, but I trust that your soul is not tainted enough to imitate the folly of lesser men. In this world there exist beings of utmost purity. Yes, I speak of her. Search the entire universe and you shall find no peers. From the moment of her birth she was complete. She did not and would never receive even the barest mite of influence from the vulgar outside world. The scar on her neck ever flagrant. Her words pregnant only with hex. Fated to remain forlorn, doomed to never be loved. Even an existence such as mine could not compete with a being as miraculously immaculate as her. For the first time I had laid eyes upon true beauty. I clutched a hand to my chest, overcome by the nature of her being. How wonderful was a man to bring forth something so spectacular by mere chance. I knew immediately, on some primal level, that hers was not a state of being that others could hope to aspire to. One could devote his life to unraveling the mysteries of dusty grimoires, and never so much as set foot upon the mystic plane that was her dominion. She was absolute in her otherness. I must confess, I found myself envious of her. Who would not? I'm sure you scoff at the very notion, of course. I can say that meeting her was the one true moment of brilliance to be found amongst the miserable ordeal of my life. In a way, it represented loss on my part, yet defeat has never tasted sweeter. I finally discovered a goal to strive toward amid the endless expanse of the wasteland that I had wandered aimlessly for so long. I shall kneel before you, my beloved queen. I shall devote my very being to you, to the task of leading your soul to salvation. That shall be my opera, the day of wrath that shall rend asunder the accursed ghetto that is the universe. Come now. It's time to take center stage, Zarathustra. Take her hand and lead her in dance. I would like nothing more than for you to dazzle me. Suddenly, I heard the sound of waves crashing against the shore. I found myself standing on a mysterious beach, bathed in the crimson hue of dusk. This was a place far removed from the hectic fervor of the city. I could hear nothing but the quiet murmur of the waves and the sporadic chirping of birds somewhere in the distance. The scenery around me possessed a fleeting beauty, one brought about by the setting sun as it melted in the contours of the distant sea. This was the sort of sight that would normally vanish in an instant, but somehow I knew that here it would persist eternally. This was a moment frozen in time. Half of the sun had already sunk beyond the horizon, but the remaining half would never budge. The waves continuing to roll in and out were surely governed by something other than the tidal force I was familiar with. Suddenly I understood. This was a dream. There wasn't a beach like this anywhere near Suihara City. Hell, it didn't even really look like somewhere in Japan. I had set foot on foreign soil, set foot on a temporal plane far removed from the present. It would seem that I understood the nature of this place on an instinctual level. By all means, I should have felt some sense of bewilderment, being confronted with so surreal a scene, but I found myself simply captivated by it. There was a certain nostalgic atmosphere about the place that spoke to me. No, maybe what really drew me in was the sense of stagnation. This was a world frozen in time, possessed of the beauty of an everlasting sunset. The very concept of the flow of time was meaningless here. An eternal twilight, decorated by a sun that would never dip below the horizon. This world existed on a border between day and night, its very existence a precarious reverie falling between the cracks of reality. I felt truly at peace here, within this concentrated moment. I sat down on the beach, absently staring out at the sea and listening to the waves. I found myself overcome with a peculiar sense of déjà vu. Even though I had never laid eyes on this place before, it was like I was already deeply familiar with it. Obviously, this was all just a dream, but it was a pleasant feeling nonetheless. Knowing what you're dealing with in advance means that you can handle anything that might throw your way. Foreknowledge makes it possible to avoid dangerous situations and prolong pleasant ones, to make better, more meaningful decisions. What could bring about a greater sense of peace? Yes, my ideal world was knowing everything in advance, going around in circles until the day you die. Was that your heart's desire? She cut across my line of vision at nearly the exact same time as I turned around. For the first time, I knew what it meant to have your breath taken away. The word that immediately came to my mind was enchanting. I felt certain that anyone who came across this girl on this beach would be stunned in the same way I was. She was outfitted in a shabby, worn-out dress. No one could call her attire elegant, but on her it exuded a radiance that women of high society could never hope to attain with even their most extravagant formal wear. Her long hair emanated from an auburn aura, lit up by the dull red glow of the setting sun as she danced across the wet sand of the beach. The stark white angles peeking out from the hem of her dress offered a sharp contrast to the warm colors of the world around her. She turned to face me, emerald eyes gleaming with a gentle light. I couldn't take my eyes off of her. She was like a gemstone cut in a human form. As I stared, she began to sing, a ghost of a smile playing across her face. I could only give myself unto her song, unto the sweet refrain brought forth by her heavenly voice. The words, l'enfant de la punition, suddenly flashed through my head. That's French for, like, child punishment? Infant punishment? I didn't know what those words meant or why they came to me now. Her song was a melody unfamiliar to me. However, I felt certain that it was some form of prayer, perhaps a hymn unbeknownst to all but her. The girl before me was utterly pure, removed from our base world. How could a melody spilling forth from the lips of such a being so immaculate be anything but a prayer? Was it possible to listen to a song you have never heard before within a dream? I don't know, but there was no sense in pondering such questions. She was beautiful, plain and simple. That was enough to make everything else seem. Something felt vaguely out of place. Was I overlooking something important? The stirring of emotion I had felt up to that point dissolved. Listening with a clear head, the lyrics of her song began to form intelligible sentences. I had been a fool. Throughout Japan's history, twilight, the borderline between day and night, had been regarded as the time when the boundaries between the natural and supernatural grew thin. Twilight was when the inhuman walked among the living. All along, this girl had been mad.
血が欲しい。ギロチンに注ごう飲み物を。ギロチンの渇きを癒すため。欲しいのは血。
She continued singing, the same smile as ever adorning her features. Her emerald eyes were as clear as the surface of a pristine lake, without a trace of malevolence to be found, which was precisely why the scene before me was so horrifying. She possessed a childlike innocence, in jarring contrast to the other profanity of her accursed song. Her song reverberated inside my head, splitting itself into seemingly endless echoes. As I stared at her, I caught a glimpse of the crimson band around her neck, through her disheveled hair, unmistakably the work of a guillotine's blade. This was the same girl I had met in the museum. The cursed girl who had met her end by the guillotine. L'enfant de la punition, the damned girl. I was assaulted by a sudden brutal impact, as if I'd been hit by a semi. My vision went black. In the next moment, I found myself in the midst of a turbulent crowd gathered around gallows set up in the center of a plaza. A torrent of sheer delirium, fueled by fear and hatred and a dark elation consumed everything. The scenery around me little more than churning chaos. A deafening chorus filled my ears. Je vous le sang, sang, sang et te sang. Donos le sang de guillotine. Pour guérir la sécurité de la guillotine. Je vous le sang, sang, sang et sang. The frenzied crowd was singing the same song that I had heard only moments earlier, back in the time period when public executions like this were commonplace. It must have been the hymn they offered before the guillotine. The elites, the clergy, and the common man had come together, all for the simple purpose of seeing a criminal decapitated before their eyes, to see my head fly from my shoulders. That's right. Don't ask me why, but the criminal strapped to the guillotine was none other than myself. Next to me, some sort of official was calling out to the crowd, speaking a language I didn't recognize. It would seem he was recruiting a volunteer to act as the executioner. It wasn't long before a man emerged from the crowd. He released the guillotine's blade, and my head tumbled to the ground, bathed in the queer tones of the eternal dusk. My spine was severed in an instant. inducing ataxia, but my ability to feel pain had been lost, along with the connection between my brain and the rest of my body. I could do nothing but stare up at my headless body as it spewed forth blood. Ugh, look at that. Ah, my heart was still beating. I wanted nothing more to extend a hand to my body, but that was impossible now. All I could do was lie on the ground listening to that abominable refrain. Oh boy, that was a hell of a dream. I jolted out of bed only to find that it was already light outside. I immediately reached out for my neck. It was, of course, still attached to the rest of my body. Some dreams are so vivid, though. You have to help but wonder.